Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu, sitting in for Riz Khan. 1 year ago, Barack Obama was sworn in as the 44th President of the United States, marking a historic moment for the country. That moment was taken by many as a sign of a post-racial America. But does that attitude still hold today? On the one hand, according to recent polls, African Americans say they believe black progression has improved and are optimistic about the future of race relations. On the other hand, things appear bleak for African Americans. They are disproportionately affected by the failing economy and growing unemployment, and some high-profile incidents in the past year indicate that racism is still rampant. 1 year ago, nearly 2 million people gathered to witness a historic moment, a black man becoming leader of the free world. There, President Obama made his call for unity.
This is the meaning of our liberty and our creed, why men and women and children of every race and every faith can join in celebration across this magnificent mall, and why a man whose father less than 60 years ago might not have been served at a local restaurant can now stand before you to take a most sacred oath. So let us mark this day with remembrance of who we are and how far we have traveled.
So today we ask, how far have race relations improved since Obama's presidency? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or email, and we also welcome your phone calls on the show. Joining me today is Dr. Peniel Joseph, a professor of history at Tufts University. He's a frequent commentator on issues of race, civil rights and democracy, and author of Dark Days, Bright Nights, From Black Power to Barack Obama, which highlights black movements from slavery to the inauguration of President Obama. And Deborah Dickson contributed to Mother Jones magazine. Her essays have focused on race relations and racial identity in the United States. She is the author of The End of Blackness, in which she urges the African American community to move beyond blaming white oppression for the community's problems. Also with us, New York Times columnist Charles Blow, who recently wrote an article on the current state of African Americans under Obama's presidency entitled Black in the Age of Obama. Thanks to all of you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Deborah Dickson, let me start with you. We heard there the President saying a remembrance of who we are and how far we have traveled. Now, according to recent research, black people's assessment about the state of black progress in the United States has improved dramatically during the past 2 years. According to the Pew researchers, Barack Obama's election as the nation's first black president appears to be the spur for that optimism. Do you think that optimism is well placed?
Well, who exactly did he mean when he said who we are and how far we've come? Maybe he meant America. Maybe he didn't mean black people as a sort of set apart and a group. And speaking of that, let me just start this off with a quibble. Your description of my book as wanting black people to move beyond complaining about white racism for our problems. We can complain and analyze, and we should use those things, but that book was a clarion call. My problem with this is that we stop there. We do the complaining and then that's it. But you can't just complain that somebody beats you up and steals your lunch money every day, and in there, you know, you've got to learn karate or something. So my argument is that, yes, there are still very serious and systemic problems. The problem now is institutionalized racism, more so than back of the bus lunch counter stuff. And we have to figure out ways. We can't just complain and analyze. We got that part covered. But to come back to your question, who did he mean, who we are and how far we've come? I like to think he meant America.
Well, he mentioned just before he asked that, when he made that statement, rather, he mentioned his father, whom he said 60 years ago would not be served in a restaurant. So I would imagine he was referring to black people at that point.
I'm still quibbling. I'm not sure. Where my second book came from was reading all of Dr. King's speeches and all of those sort of the foundational documents, and coming to understand that he was talking to everybody and not just white people. So yes, it's definitely true how far black people have come, but it's a measure of how far America has come, that nobody's going to try and pull that. So are the problems still very real? We're still a very segregated society, absolutely. My own children are biracial, but they look white, and they go to an urban charter school. And they're 6 and 8, and they're getting it now. They're constantly coming home and saying things to me like, Mommy, so-and-so at school is a brown girl, but I still like her anyway. Where are they getting these messages, especially when they go to an urban school? So Miles and miles to go before we sleep, but we have come a very long way as a group and as a nation.
Okay, let's go to Professor Joseph at the Harvard studio there. Professor, you've written extensively about the stages of black movements. What are those stages, and how do you connect them to Barack Obama?
Well, when we think about African American struggles in the United States, certainly there's the period of antebellum slavery up until 1865, where African Americans are chattel slaves, legalized property. The next phase is going to be really a period of Reconstruction between 1865 and 1877, and that's going to be on the heels of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and that's really going to provide citizenship, freedom, and voting rights, at least for black men. And that was an age where there's going to be black congressmen, there's going to be a black governor, there's really going to be a hope of transforming American democracy. Unfortunately, that age is going to be replaced by an era known as redemption, which is an era of institutionalized racism, segregation, and violence, most notably lynching, and really the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. And we think about hate groups and terrorist groups like the Klan. Between the late 19th century all the way up into the 1920s and 30s, they're really going to flourish throughout Southern civil society, but they're going to really manifest a cultural and political racism that grips the whole nation. And so by the time we get to the modern period of the civil rights movement, the so-called heroic period of the civil rights movement, that's really the period that Barack Obama talks about in his memoir, Dreams from My Father. So between 1954 and 1965, we've got the Brown desegregation court decision. We've got demonstrations in places like Selma. We've got the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the direct action sit-in movements that flourish throughout the South. And we have Birmingham, where Dr. King writes his famous letter from a Birmingham jail, where he talks about democracy. He talks about why we can't wait, meaning African Americans, for social and political justice. That waiting actually distorts and defames American democracy. And we also have the passage of the Civil Rights Act in '64 and the Voting Rights Act in '65. And after that civil rights period, we have a period of black power activism as well that really converges and parallels with that civil rights experience, but also flourishes in that aftermath. And people like Stokely Carmichael, people like Malcolm X, people like Sonia Sanchez, Amiri Baraka, and a number of grassroots activists really combatively tried to transform American democracy. At the grassroots level, they did this with tenant strikes, with rent strikes, with movements for welfare rights and social services. They also did it in sports and culture. When we think about Tommy Smith at the Olympics in 1968 and Juan Carlos in Mexico City, and the Black Power symbolism and the fist. The Black Panthers are probably going to be the most iconic group of this period, and they brandish guns and bandoliers in an effort to end police brutality, but they also start breakfast programs and social services programs. Okay. In the aftermath of that Black Power period in the 1970s and 80s, we're going to really see a move. Sometimes people talk about from protest to politics, but I say we really see protest and politics. We're going to see roiling demonstrations for affirmative action. We're going to see a movement where Harold Washington becomes a mayor of Chicago, the first African-American mayor of Chicago, and Jesse Jackson runs for president in 1984 and 1988. And that specifically connects to Barack Obama, because Obama comes of political age in New York City and Chicago in the 1980s. And Obama is a community organizer in Harold Washington, Chicago. And Jesse Jackson's presidential runs really impact Barack Obama's presidential run, because it's Jackson who, along with Shirley Chisholm in 1972, who tried to do this as well, was transformed the Democratic Party's winner-take-all primary system and allow proportional representation. And that's how Barack Obama became the nominee over Hillary Clinton, because by the old rules, Hillary Clinton would have been the Democratic Party's nominee in 2008.
Okay, I want to bring in Charles Blow at this stage. Charles Blow, there appears to be very different perceptions of who Barack Obama is and how he's looked at by different parts of America. I'm looking at a survey here on who is Barack Obama, and offered a choice, 55% of blacks said Barack Obama is black, and about a third of blacks who were questioned says he's of mixed race origin. Now those figures are somewhat reversed among whites. 55% say he is mixed race, 24% or a quarter say he's black. He's viewed very differently. Is that a case of black pride versus white anxieties, I suppose?
Definitely, you know, part of that's related to black pride, but I don't know if it's white anxiety. I mean, that particular question, and I saw that survey, is caught up in the definition of, you know, what it means to be black in America, and you know, and that has a very long history, which, you know, the two professors you're talking to could probably talk to you more about than I can. But you know, but it was you know, part of the code, which was that, you know, one drop of black blood and you makes you black, and that has kind of stuck with black people for a very long time. So it doesn't surprise me in any way that the first kind of knee-jerk reaction to a question like that coming from someone giving you a survey would be to say that he's black, because on some level, you know, most of us are mixed race. You know, we don't have to go too far back in our lineages to find someone, you know, in my family, to find someone who's white, and they may have been part of the family voluntarily and through some act of love or through some act of violence, but it's there. And, you know, so I think that, you know, on some level you might view it as a sign of progress that people identify people of mixed race, particularly first generation people of mixed race who have white or black or mixed race parents, that becomes a separate designation, which what the census is trying to started to do in the last couple of rounds.
Okay, and that I want to take that to Deborah Dickson. Deborah, you wrote in a piece in Salon.com, you once wrote that Obama is black.
This conversation.
Yes, you wrote that Obama
is
is
not black.
But not black, right. Explain that to us.
Oh, Lordy, I've been explaining this for a couple of years now, and what I meant, what people heard me say was he's not black because, damn it, he didn't come through the slave experience, and how dare he. That is not what I was saying at all. What I was offering is a critique of this, how circumscribed the social definition of black is, and I will contend to the day that I die, and this question will probably kill me, that black, as it's used in this country, the social construction means people who have historically been enslaved and oppressed by white people. There's no room for the millions of ethnic and immigrant blacks who come here from other countries. You get on the plane Nigerian, you get off the plane black, and nobody wants to have a conversation about anything that has to do with you that's outside that black and white dance to the death. But I continue to believe that the Nigerian cab driver with a PhD that he can't use here might want to have a different discussion than I want to have, or who is descended from multiple generations of slaves and God knows who else, and Jim Crow sharecroppers. Those millions of people, just the fact that they chose to come here to a country where we say racism is rampant and generally outperform native-born blacks, just tells me that their black ain't like my black. And I've come to think of them as ethnic blacks, you know, Haitian, Nigerian, and they usually identify that way, and they never get to speak. We use them if they get roughed up by the police, Diallo and Louima, but otherwise we have no use for them. So I am critiquing the circumscribed notion of the term. It's a label that obscures more than it illuminates. He's not black. He's Kenyan American. He's an ethnic black. My children are not black. They're biracial. Who knows what they're going to think about race? Okay, we'll bring that point up again, but we have to take a short break right now. Before we go, we asked people on the streets of Washington about how President Obama has shaped race relations in America. Here's a sample of some of their responses.
I would say that it's definitely a big step forward in the United States to have our first African-American president, our first black president. Though unfortunately, I think it has drawn out a lot of the inherent racism that's in the United States. I think a lot of it's still kind of under the cover, and I think with some of the policy changes that Obama was trying to implement, I think that it's kind of brought up a lot that was still in America, and I think that still needs to be addressed. U.S. is changing a lot, but it takes time. So you can't change everything in a day or two, but he's trying his level best. That's what I think so.
We've noticed that it seems like, at least in our area, that people are friendlier that the racial mixes are a little friendlier.
In America now, we have seen a progress. To say the progress is like to say we are in every color. We can say that we have seen something going on. It is coming good. It's good. It's good. Right now it's good. People are just having confidence of themselves. And that's what matters.